Hey there, it's Brian here, and if you are a business founder and you are thinking of scaling and growing your business and doing that by now taking on maybe your first salesperson, then I'm going to suggest you don't do that until you have what I'm about to discuss in this video in place. Now, if you've already hired and maybe it didn't work out and perhaps the two of you have parted ways, then again, make sure you have this in place before you ever think about your next hire. Or if you have a sales hire and maybe their performance isn't exactly where you hoped it would be and they've been with you now for a while, again, what I'm going to discuss here will really help you turn that around and fix the problem that you've created for yourself. Because one of the things that I find when I work with a lot of my clients, especially with regards to building a high-performing sales team and just starting with that very first hire, when it goes wrong, it's usually not because of the salesperson. I've talked about this in other videos, so feel free to go and watch those. It's usually not, I said, their skill set or their performance. It's the fact that they've walked into something, your business, that doesn't have a sales system in place. And that's the key. So I want to talk about what a sales system is, the components that would go into it, and therefore how you can implement this into your organization. As I said, get this done before, obviously, you do make your next sales hire. Now, if you don't know me, very briefly, my name is Brian Conway. I've worked in sales for over 30 years. I've run my own businesses for over 25 years. I've run sales teams. I've hired salespeople, but I've also trained and coached the sales organizations for some of the biggest tech companies all over the world. Big brands, names you would know, applications and software and tools that you use on a daily basis, probably. Those are the kind of companies I'm talking about. But even if you're a small business or a mid-sized business and you're looking to grow, and you as the founder has been the sales engine for some time, obviously growth will now come by starting to develop a sales team. And that's what I do. I work with people to help them do that. Now, quite often what happens is when I sit down with those individuals, they will say, well, I have a sales system. I do this, I do this, I do this. You have a sales system. Your business doesn't have a sales system. You do stuff by instinct. You've been running your business probably for a number of years, and you just kind of, without even thinking about it, have a natural flow of how you move an opportunity through your organization. That doesn't transfer to other people. You onboard somebody, you might sit down with them for a few hours, a couple of days, or whatever it takes, and you onboard them and tell them a bit about your company and what you sell and what the market is like, etc., and what you expect of them and what the compensation plan looks like, and they're going to get excited about that sort of stuff. And then you leave them to it. And that's not a system, okay? That's just you giving them some direction of where you want them to go. A system is more systematic than that. And that's the key. And I'll explain a few of the key components of a sales system. But when you have a system, or a playbook is something again, with a lot of my clients, I help them build a sales playbook. If you've ever read the book, The E-Myth Revisited, which you should if you are trying to grow and scale an organization, that whole book by Michael Gerber talks about having systems in place. That's what allows scale. Like McDonald's, they use that as an example quite often. They have a system, a repeatable system that they could bring in any employee, plug it into the system, and they become productive very quick. The same principle applies when you are onboarding or hiring a salesperson. And yet it seems to be the one system that seems to get ignored. And I think it's because it sits inside the founder's head. So what I want to do is answer a few questions with regards, what does a system look like? What should go into it? So you can develop your own playbook or system for your organization. And with that in place, then you can hire into it. And you can use it as part of the hiring process. You can then use it as a part of the interview process, actually ask questions of your prospective employee around components of the playbook, and therefore set much clearer expectations and so on. Now, I know a lot of, again, founders sometimes push back and go, well, look, I've said to this person, my door's open anytime. Come and ask me any question you have anytime. So I don't understand why they're still failing or why you should avoid this situation if you haven't hired yet. But they say, I don't understand why they're still failing. I said, well, it's because they're not going to come and keep knocking on your door. They're not going to keep coming back asking question after question, especially if things aren't working well and they're not building pipeline or closing deals or whatever kind of the primary functions are for that individual. They're just not going to. It's human nature. It'll look like a sign of weakness, and you're going to be judging them on it, and they don't want that. They'd rather try and fix it themselves. There's a bit of ego in there and all sorts of things. So you're better off just having a much clearer definition of roles, responsibilities, activities, steps of the process, and all that sort of stuff. So one of the first things I would suggest you do is really define who your ideal client is. So we talk about ICPs, an ideal customer profile. Who is that? I'm not saying that can be the only person you sell to, but for any kind of sales motion, that needs to be clearly defined. And it can make a big difference. So one client I worked with not so long back, they'd gone through a couple of salespeople. One had left within 6 weeks, so that was a total waste of time, money and everything. And the other one lasted a little bit longer, but again, they'd all parted ways and they found themselves back at square one. So I said, well, look, this is what we need to do. First thing, let's define who your ICP is, so they can know who they're talking to, who they're looking for, what to say, what goes on in that individual's marketplace, so they can get kind of closer and better understand that individual that they're hoping to sell to. So I said, so who would you say is your ideal client? And they said, well, 70% of our customers are probably retailers. And there were some reasons for that with their history and everything, so without going into that now, I said, right, well, let's define your ICP as, because obviously you can service them extremely well, as your ideal customer profile. And let's kind of look at who they are, what their key kind of desires are, key pain points, all that sort of stuff. That will make it easier when you onboard your new salesperson to know and understand who they're selling to. So something as simple as that can already give clarity to the sales motion for that new hire. Now, it doesn't mean you only ever sell to that one person. You can have multiple kind of customer sectors, perhaps, or customer types that you go after. But again, they all need to be defined, but they can't be within one sales motion. So it's best to keep it simple, get them onboarded, working on one ICP with one kind of process, etc. And that will just ramp them up significantly quicker. And once they're making some sales and you're starting to see some revenue, then they can start to maybe expand and they've got the confidence and understand how everything works. Now they can start to maybe look at different clients. Or you might onboard a second salesperson now and get them to focus on a different ICP. That's an option. But until you know who you're selling to, and you do it instinctively and probably don't think about it, this organization that I was telling you about, they hadn't even realized, it was only when they looked at their databases, they hadn't even realized how big a percentage of their customers were actually coming from this one demographic, this kind of one industry vertical. So let's define that first of all. Now, the second thing then is, so if you find a prospect, how does that deal move through your business? What is the process, the step-by-step process? It might be you do some prospecting and then you have a discovery call with that individual, and then maybe you demo something. So if you were an accountant, you might demo your accounting software or whatever. If you're a financial advisor, you might demo your kind of wealth management platform. You show somebody what you do. And then if they were interested, it may go to, I don't know, some kind of audit. So if you're a financial advisor, you would audit somebody's finances. If you were an accountant, you audit somebody's kind of business finance, etc., whatever it might be. And I work with a lot of tech companies, so it might be auditing a company's infrastructure, looking at the security, doing a posture assessment, as we call it, around their security or whatever. It doesn't really matter. Usually there will be a series of steps that you do, again, instinctively, that sits inside your head that you've been doing for a period of time. That could be quite a long time, as you've been growing your business and you know the questions to ask and all that sort of stuff. So it's about kind of getting that out of your head and into a playbook. Now, it just provides, again, a guideline, but it will help a new hire really understand what's expected of them. When they are doing discovery calls, they know it's with the intention of going to a demo. Or if they're doing a demo, they know that it's with the intention of moving the sale incrementally along to the next step. Because you can't just focus on you close more business. You've got these micro closes, I call them, throughout that process. If you can define the process and understand what they are, it just makes life easier for everybody. It also means then you can optimize the various steps. You can really help coach an individual if they're stuck at any particular step. So you've got to get that process defined. Now within there, then you can start to think about what good looks like. What would a good prospect look like that you would want to come through that process? So it starts to define maybe some of your qualification criteria, because what will happen quite often is if you've got a new hire and they're not performing and they haven't got any numbers on the board, so to speak, they've not closed any business, you're getting frustrated with them, starting to do a little bit micromanagement perhaps. They don't like that, but they're desperate to kind of save face and put something on the board. Then quite often they'll start trying to close any business, or they'll fill the pipeline with absolute rubbish, or they'll invite people to a demo or a webinar that really aren't highly qualified opportunities, but just to be seen to be doing something, that there's activity, that there is some success happening, when actually what often happens is you end up with a bunch of customers that aren't ideal for your business. They become more problematic than they should be, and it was all because of this desperation sometimes from that salesperson. So again, this clarity will just help smooth the whole kind of sales motion, and because of what happens, grow motivation and success on both parties. So as part of that might be then kind of defining your success criteria, kind of the metrics, the KPIs perhaps that you're then going to monitor somebody on, what conversion rates they should be getting at each of those stages. So you can start to set some weekly standards, monthly or quarterly metrics that you can start to measure. But you can only measure now because, or only manage now because you've got those measurements and metrics in place. So that's key, and I'm not talking about just having a CRM or something, which will define maybe stages of a customer moving through your business. I'm kind of talking more about the actual sales activities. This will feed into a CRM if you have one, and the two things will sort of marry up. But it's not about kind of the tool. It's not about the scripts necessarily, but again, you can start to write scripts and fine-tune kind of various conversation types to have. You can fine-tune what objections look like, how to handle those objections, etc., etc. So it's kind of, as I said, it's like a playbook for sales. That's what it is. And if your sales hire is walking into a situation, your business, a sales organization, which is now them in effect, and all this isn't defined, then it's very hard for them to get going. It's hard for them to build momentum. It all sits in your head. As I said, they'd have to keep coming to you to ask questions and clarify things. That then is re-involving you in the sales motion when perhaps you're trying to step back, and you'll probably start getting frustrated and thinking, well, I'm still involved in all of these deals. And it's partly because you haven't shared what that motion looks like. So there are a few kind of key elements of what a sales system would look like, or what a sales playbook would look like. Now, I have recently written a short ebook. Actually, I'll put a link for this in the description wherever you're watching this video, and you can download that. And that just kind of expands on this a little bit more, gives a little bit more detail of what maybe to look for and what to do at each of these stages, etc. But it is so important. You should not hire, or don't hire again if you haven't this in place. And if you have somebody in place, then fix this and it will help them, because now you can just kind of go back to them and say, right, let's look at what you're doing and how it fits in with what we need to do and what works best. It's like our own private series of best practices, and let's work out kind of what's broken, fix it, and let's move forward. And you make it a positive thing, because one of the things you might find is that actually once you've defined this process, that if you bring on a salesperson, it's not about running the whole process, the end-to-end sell. Maybe what you're actually looking for is just somebody to do some prospecting and qualification perhaps, and demos, and then you do the final closing and negotiations. Or maybe you do all the feed the funnel because you have contacts and networking activities that you do, and you want to do more of that, and then allow the salesperson to qualify and move, as I said, the kind of the sale through to close. So it'll also help you define roles and responsibilities, and that is key, because then everybody knows what everybody should be doing, when handover should happen, and that will avoid things falling in gaps. Well, I thought you were doing that. Well, no, I thought you were doing it. All that sort of stuff. All that does is create anxiety, animosity between two parties. It just doesn't create a great working condition. So having a sales system is the key to success, and hopefully from this video that's given you some insight into what that looks like. Now, if you want me to help you do this and pull it out of your head. I do run a consultancy kind of activity where we go through my whole blueprint, we pull out of your head everything you know, we document it and turn that into a playbook that you can use for the recruitment process, for onboarding, for ramp up, and for running a professional sales team. And that then allows you, as I said, to define roles, and then you can know exactly who you need to hire, what skills and competencies you're looking for at any different time, as you know, as the team grows. And this is what a high-performing sales team is built on. So if that's your goal, then stop, rewind, get this in place. Talk to me again. I'll put a link in the description where you can get at least just have a chat. I'm not saying if you talk to me, you have to work with me. I'm saying, if you've got some questions, let's just have a conversation. I'll give you some tips on how you can do this for your business, totally free of charge. And if that works and helps, then great. I just want you to be successful. I know what it's like growing a business. I know what it's like onboarding salespeople. You know what you do, but actually running a sales team is a very different thing. So hope you found this useful. Please do like, share, comment, all that sort of stuff. It's always appreciated. If you have any questions, put them in the comments wherever you're watching this, and I'll come back to you and I'll answer them. If you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe. I've just started a new YouTube channel. I have one all around kind of selling, but I've just started this new channel for business founders with regards to especially building a sales organization, and especially these kind of first hires. Let's get it right from the beginning. Let's get the right first time, every time, and you'll thank me for it later, I promise you. So, and if you haven't even hired somebody yet, then do this before you ever do. It will just save you so much time, because there's nothing worse than going 3-6 months down the road and finally you part ways and you find yourself back at square one. The pipeline's probably the worst it's ever been because you kind of stepped away from the sales motion of your company, and we really do not want that to happen. So, as I said, hope you found that useful. I'd love to see your comments and thoughts. As I said, look for the links in the description below. There'll be one to my new ebook. You can have that, give you a load more detail. Or if you just want a chat and a conversation, then again, there's a link for that where you can get more information about what I can do, or you can just book the opportunity to have a conversation, and I'll be happy to give you some tips that you can take away. And if you're skeptical and go, well, why would you do that? There's got to be a catch. Well, there's usually 3 things that happen when I have a conversation with somebody. They either take what we've talked about away, implement, and their business kind of moves forward and grows and scales, which is great, and I'm more than happy for that to happen without me, but I usually then get at least a testimonial from that, and that's great for marketing purposes. Sometimes people will refer me to other people, and that's fine too. That brings in new business, and some people become clients. So just again, open and candid with you with regards to why I would do a free sales kind of consultation with you, and I'm more than happy to do that, as I said. But now you know why. There's no catch. It's just part of my sales motion, so to speak. So you maybe now see why that's important. So thank you for your time. I said, hope you found it useful. Please make sure you subscribe or follow whenever, because I'm going to be dropping these sort of bombs all the time now. Really help you build a fast-growing sales organization that will help you scale your business to where you want it to be over the next year or so. Okay, I'm Brian Conway. Thanks for your time. Take care.